My best friend came over for dinner like nothing was wrong. My husband cooked. I smiled. Then she cornered me at the sink and whispered, "I can't keep lying for you." I dropped the fork. She looked toward my husband and said, "Tell him by Sunday, or I will." My husband, Matthew, was outside taking a call from his brother when Rachel said it. Everything looked normal. That was what made it worse. Rachel stood beside me holding a wine glass she hadn't even taken a sip from. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "I mean it," she said. "I can't do this anymore." I whispered, "Please don't." She closed her eyes like those two words hurt her. "That's the problem," she said. "You always say please don't. You never say I will." I looked toward the back door. Matthew was still outside, pacing slowly with his phone against his ear. He had no idea that inside our kitchen, the life he trusted was cracking open. I wanted to hate Rachel in that moment. It would have been easier. But the truth was, she was not the reason I was scared. I was scared because 6 years ago, before Matthew and I got married, before the house, before the dog, before every quiet Sunday morning we spent acting like our life was honest, I cheated on him. It was not an affair. It was not love. It was not months of messages or secret meetings. It was one night after a fight, one night where I was angry and weak and wanted to feel wanted by someone who didn't look tired of me. And then I hid it. That is the part one can't soften. Back then, Matthew and I were living in a small apartment and trying to act like we were more grown than we were. We shared bills. We talked about marriage in vague little ways, like we were both afraid to say the word too directly. We would pass jewelry stores and joke about how expensive everything was. He would say things like, "Someday, when we're not eating noodles 3 nights a week," and I would laugh because I knew he meant it. But we were not in a good place. His mother, Carol, had started getting into his head. Not loudly. Not in some dramatic villain way. Just little comments. Maybe we were moving too fast. Maybe we should wait. Maybe Matthew needed to think about whether he was ready. Maybe love was not enough if money was still tight. Matthew always told me to ignore her. I always told him ignoring her felt like agreeing with her. That became our pattern. I needed him to defend me. He needed me to stop asking him to fight. I pushed harder. He went quieter. Then I took his silence as proof that I was alone. One Friday night, I saw a message from Carol pop up on his phone while it was sitting on the kitchen counter. I should not have looked. But I did. It said, "Just make sure you're not proposing because you feel pressured." My whole body went hot. Matthew came into the kitchen and saw my face. He knew immediately. I asked, "Is that what she thinks? That I'm trapping you?" He sighed before answering, and that sigh made me feel like I had already lost. "Lauren, please don't do this right now," he said. That sentence lit something ugly in me. I said, "Do you even want this?" He rubbed his face and looked away. It was probably only 2 seconds. To me, it felt like an answer. I grabbed my bag and left. I told myself I just needed air. Then I saw a message in a group chat from coworkers who were out downtown, and I went there instead of driving around until I calmed down. That was where Tyler was. Tyler was not special. I know people say that when they want to make cheating sound smaller, but I mean it in the most pathetic way. He was just a coworker who noticed I had been crying. He asked if I was okay. He listened. He laughed at the right moments. He looked at me like I was not difficult. I drank too much. I talked too much. I let myself enjoy being noticed. At some point, Tyler walked me outside. My phone kept buzzing in my purse. I knew it was probably Matthew. I didn't check. Tyler said, "You don't have to go home yet." I could have walked away. I could have called a ride. I could have answered my phone. Instead, I went with him. I am not going to make this more graphic than it needs to be. I crossed a line I could never uncross. The next morning, I sat in my car outside his apartment and cried until my face hurt. I blocked his number before I drove home. There was no goodbye text. No secret attachment. Nothing that could make it feel romantic or complicated. Just guilt. When I got home, Matthew was asleep on the couch in his jeans. His phone was on his chest. There was a glass of water on the coffee table, and the blanket from our bed was folded over the armrest like he had been waiting for me and finally passed out. He had called me 11 times. I stood there staring at him and wanted to confess right then. Instead, I took a shower. I put my clothes in the laundry. I got into bed and lay there until he woke up. He came into the bedroom looking exhausted and relieved. "I was worried about you," he said. I said, "I'm sorry." He thought I meant the fight. I let him. For the next week, I barely functioned. I could not eat without feeling sick. I could not look at Matthew too long. Every kind thing he did made me feel worse. If he touched my shoulder, I flinched. If he asked if I was okay, I lied. Eventually, I told Rachel because I thought I was going to break apart. She came over with coffee and found me sitting on the kitchen floor. I didn't build up to it. I just said, I did something horrible. Then I told her everything. When I finished, she stared at me like she didn't know who I was. You have to tell him, she said. I know. No, she said. Not someday. Now. I promised I would. At the time, I meant it. That is what makes it so hard to explain. I didn't wake up and decide to become a liar forever. I told myself I needed the right moment. Then I told myself Matthew and I needed to be stable first. Then I told myself it would hurt him more to know. Every delay became another layer. A few weeks later, Matthew apologized for not standing up to Carol. He told her our relationship was not something she got to manage. He started showing up in the ways I had begged him to before. And instead of feeling happy, I felt trapped by my own guilt. 3 months after I cheated, he proposed in our living room. It was not grand. He burned the garlic bread. The smoke detector screamed for almost a full minute. He was nervous and laughing, and when he got down on one knee, his hands were shaking. He said, I don't need a perfect life. I just want ours. I should have told him. I said yes. Rachel asked me the next day when she saw the ring. Did you tell him? I said, not yet. Her face fell. Lauren. I will, I said. Just not right now. She asked when right now would finally come. After the invitations? After the wedding? After kids? I snapped and told her it was my marriage, not hers. She said, then stop making me carry it. We didn't talk for almost 2 weeks after that. Then we apologized without fixing anything. She stayed my maid of honor. She stood beside me at the wedding. She gave a speech about how Matthew and I had survived a hard season and came out stronger. People clapped. I felt like I was disappearing inside my dress. After the wedding, I became obsessed with being good enough. I remembered everything. I packed lunches when Matthew had early mornings. I kept track of bills. I tried to be patient when we argued. I told myself that if I loved him well enough, maybe the lie would become less important. It never did. It only became harder to tell. Years passed. We bought a small house. We adopted a dog. Matthew and I grew calmer together. Carol backed off. Our fights became normal married couple fights about laundry, schedules, and whose turn it was to call the plumber. Sometimes I would look at Matthew while he was doing something ordinary, like fixing a cabinet handle or falling asleep with the TV remote in his hand, and I would think, telling him now would be cruel. That became my favorite excuse. Rachel didn't bring it up all the time, but it never disappeared between us. When Matthew helped her move apartments, she barely looked at him afterward. When he dropped soup on her porch because she was sick and I was stuck at work, she texted me, he is a good person. I wrote back, I know. She didn't reply. I understood why. So when she stood in my kitchen years later and said she couldn't lie anymore, I should not have been shocked. I was still shocked. I whispered, not here. She said, then where? You've had 6 years to choose where. Matthew laughed outside at something his brother said on the phone, and I felt my stomach twist. I told Rachel she had no right to destroy my life just because she wanted a clean conscience. The second I said it, I knew how ugly it sounded, but fear was turning me into someone I hated. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. I have been standing in this house letting him treat me like family, she said. He hugs me hello. He asks about my life. He trusts me. And I stand here knowing the worst thing you ever did to him is being hidden by both of us. It was one time, I said. The cheating was one time, she said. The lying wasn't. I had no answer. Then she said it again. Tell him by Sunday night, or I will. Matthew came back inside a minute later. Rachel smiled too quickly. I wiped my hands on a towel even though they were dry. He looked between us and asked, everything okay? Rachel said she was just tired. He believed her. Of course he did. That night, I lay beside Matthew and watched him sleep. He had one arm across his chest and one foot outside the blanket. He looked peaceful, and I felt like a thief standing over something I had stolen. I almost woke him up. I didn't. Saturday was a blur. Matthew made coffee. He asked if I wanted to go with him to pick out a porch light because the old one had been flickering. Such a normal thing. A porch light. I stood in the kitchen thinking, how do you shop for a porch light with someone whose whole life you might break tomorrow? He noticed something was wrong. Are you sick? He asked, pressing the back of his hand to my forehead. That almost ended me. I said I hadn't slept well. He believed that too. Rachel texted Saturday night. Have you told him? I stared at the message until the screen went dark. I wrote, "Not yet." She replied, "Sunday night." No heart. No apology. Just the deadline. I hated her for it. I also knew she was right. By Sunday afternoon, I couldn't wait anymore. Matthew was in the living room folding laundry with a game playing low on the TV. The dog was asleep by the window. Sunlight was coming through the blinds in thin lines across the floor. I stood in the doorway until Matthew looked up. "What?" he asked, smiling a little. I said, "I need to tell you something." He paused with one of my shirts in his hands. "And you're going to hate me," I said. He gave a small nervous laugh because he thought I was being dramatic. Then he saw my face and the laugh vanished. "Lauren," he said. "What happened?" I sat across from him. My mouth went dry. I had rehearsed so many versions, but only one sentence came out. "I cheated on you before we got married." The room went completely still. Matthew blinked once. Then he said, "What?" I told him everything he asked. I didn't make it sound prettier. I didn't blame the fight, or the alcohol, or his mother, even though those things were part of the night. I told him I went out with coworkers. I told him Tyler walked me outside. I told him I went to his apartment. I told him it happened once. I told him I blocked him and later left that job. Matthew did not yell. That was worse. He sat there holding my shirt like he had forgotten what hands were for. Then he asked, "Who knew?" I had been dreading that question more than any other. "Rachel," I said. His eyes lifted slowly. "Rachel knew." I nodded. "For how long?" "Since that week." He looked away. I watched a second betrayal hit him in real time. "So at our wedding," he said. I started crying. He said, "Did she know at our wedding?" "Yes." He stared at the floor. "Did everyone know except me?" "No," I said quickly. "Only Rachel." "I swear." He gave a tired, empty laugh. "That doesn't make it better." I kept saying I was sorry because there was nothing else I could say. He stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and never drank it. Then he asked, "Did you marry me knowing I didn't know who I was marrying?" I said, "I loved you." He turned around. "That's not what I asked." I could not answer because the answer was yes. I married him knowing he did not have the truth. I let him make vows without all the information. I let him build a life with a version of me that was missing the worst chapter. He went upstairs. I heard drawers open. A closet door. The zipper of a bag. I followed him, but stayed in the bedroom doorway. "Please don't leave like this," I said. He looked at me with a face I had never seen before. How should I leave? I had no answer. He packed clothes, his laptop, chargers, and a jacket. By the door, he accidentally grabbed the dog's leash even though the dog was staying with me. When he noticed it in his hand, he just stared at it. That was when I really fell apart. "I'm sorry," I said. He nodded once. "I know you are." Then he left. No slammed door. No screaming. Just his truck starting outside and the dog whining at the front window after him. I sat on the floor until my legs went numb. Rachel texted the next morning. "Did you tell him?" I wrote, "Yes." She replied, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. I still didn't know if I wanted to thank her or never speak to her again. Matthew stayed with his brother, Stephen. For the first few days, I only heard from him about practical things. A bill. The dog's food. A reminder that the porch light still needed to be returned because he had bought the wrong size. Even destroyed, he remembered details. That hurt in a way I didn't expect. When he came back to talk, he looked exhausted. His hair was messy. His eyes looked flat, like he had spent days thinking and still found no place to rest. We sat at the dining table, the same table where he had cooked dinner for Rachel. He didn't ask for details this time. He said, "I keep replaying everything." I said, "I know." He shook his head. "No, you don't." So I stayed quiet. He looked around the room at the little life we had made. The photos. The keys in the bowl. The stack of mail. The dog watching him from the hallway like he might disappear again. "I keep thinking about the wedding," he said. "Buying this house. Every time Rachel came over. Every time she laughed with me. Every time I thought we were all just family." "She wanted me to tell you," I said softly. He looked at me. Eventually. That word landed harder than anger. I told him I was sorry. He said he believed me, but he didn't know if that helped. Then he stood, went to the bedroom, and took off his ring. He didn't throw it. He didn't hand it to me. He opened the top drawer and placed it inside. When he came back, his hand looked wrong. "I don't know if I want a divorce," he said. For 1 second, I breathed. Then he said, "But I don't want to be your husband right now." I nodded because there was nothing to argue with. He said he needed space. He would stay with Steven. He asked me not to contact him unless it was important. Bills, the dog, emergencies. Then he left again. The ring stayed in the drawer. The house did not become quiet right away. At first, it felt full of evidence. His mug by the sink. His jacket over the chair. His shoes near the door. The half-finished porch light sitting in the hallway like a future we had stopped building halfway through. I cleaned until there was nothing left to clean. Then I stopped cleaning at all. The dog kept waiting by the door around the time Matthew usually came home. I wanted to explain it to him, which was ridiculous. Instead, I sat beside him and cried into his fur. Rachel called twice. I ignored both calls. On the third call, she left a voicemail. I know you probably hate me, she said. I understand if you do. But I couldn't keep pretending Matthew wasn't being lied to. I should have done something sooner. I'm sorry. I listened once. Then I deleted it. Not because I disagreed. Because I did agree, and that made everything harder. Almost 2 weeks later, Matthew came by. He texted first, which somehow made me cry before he even knocked. The dog lost his mind when Matthew walked in. Matthew crouched down and held him for a long time. I looked away because it felt too private, like I was watching grief in a language only they understood. Eventually, Matthew sat across from me in the living room. I talked to someone, he said. I thought he meant a lawyer. He meant a counselor. He said he needed help sorting out what he felt because it kept changing. Some days, the cheating felt far away enough that maybe we could work through it. Other days, he woke up furious because the lie had not been 6 years ago. The lie had been at breakfast. On birthdays. In every photo where he was smiling and I knew something he didn't. Then he said, I don't know which betrayal I'm supposed to grieve. I told him I would do anything. Counseling. Space. Honesty. Whatever he needed. He said, I don't want promises right now. Promises feel cheap. That hurt, but I understood. Then he asked, why didn't you tell me after I proposed? I wanted to say because I was scared, but that felt too small. So I told him the truth. Because I wanted the life you were offering me more than I wanted to be honest. He closed his eyes. For a moment, I thought he would leave. Instead, he said, that is the first thing you've said that feels completely true. We did not decide anything that day. Divorce felt too big to choose while we were both still bleeding, but staying married felt impossible to pretend about. He remained at Steven's place. I stayed in the house. We agreed to counseling separately before even thinking about counseling together. A week after that, I met Rachel for coffee. I almost canceled 3 times. When I walked in, she was already there with 2 cups on the table, like we were still the kind of friends who could predict each other's order without thinking. We were not those people anymore. I sat down and said, I don't know how to talk to you. She nodded. I should have done it sooner, she said. I expected her to defend herself. She didn't. I told myself it wasn't my secret, she said. Then I told myself you would tell him. Then I told myself too much time had passed. I was a coward too. For years, I thought hearing her admit that would make me feel better. It didn't. It just made the whole thing sadder. I said, you waited until I had a husband, a house, a life. She looked down. I know. And then you gave me 2 days. I know. I wanted to keep being angry. I wanted her to be the villain for just a little longer so I could stop being the only one in my own head. Then I asked, do you think I deserve to lose him? Rachel took a long time to answer. Finally, she said, I think he deserved to choose you with the truth. That was the sentence that cut through everything. Because she was right. Matthew should have been able to choose me with open eyes. Maybe he would have stayed. Maybe he would have left. Maybe our life would have been completely different. But it would have been his choice. A month has passed now. Matthew still has not moved back in. His ring is still in the drawer. He comes over sometimes to see the dog, pick up mail, or talk through practical things. He no longer kisses me when he leaves. Sometimes he almost does out of habit, then catches himself, and that small pause hurts more than any insult could. We have not told our families. I don't know if that is privacy or denial. Rachel and I are not back to normal. I don't know if we ever will be. Too much guilt lived between us for too long, and now that it is out in the open, it has changed shape instead of disappearing. Last night, Matthew came by because some of his mail had arrived. It was raining, and for a few minutes the house felt almost like it used to. The dog slept on the couch. Matthew stood near the door holding an envelope. I wanted so badly to ask him to stay. I didn't. Instead, I asked, do you think you'll ever forgive me? He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if forgiveness means coming back or leaving without hating you. That was not the answer I wanted. but it was honest. After he left, I went upstairs and opened the drawer where his ring still sits. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it. Now I think the worst thing I did was take away his chance to decide what kind of truth he was willing to live with. I don't know if this ends with divorce, counseling, forgiveness, or two people quietly accepting that love was not enough to fix what I hid underneath it. But I know the truth did not destroy my marriage in one night. I did that slowly. So now I'm asking honestly, because I don't trust my own judgment anymore, am I the only villain for hiding it for 6 years, or was my best friend wrong for waiting until my whole life was built before forcing me to tell the truth?